Well, so we thought that naturally the next best move would be for them to meet their new boss. So Todd Pyatt, the CEO of Rave, joined at 10:30 a.m. So this is like half an hour after we told them. And then by 2 p.m. that day, our entire team was on the call with Rave Mobile Safety for their annual kickoff and they had 10 times more employees than us, and they were all on that call too. You've just had a life-changing event. You sold your business and locked in your financial freedom for the rest of your life. But you're not off the hook yet. You've got to navigate the complexities of taking your company and merging it with the acquirer's firm. Today, we'll cover what it takes to bring two companies together. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Startup Different. There's Chris. I'm Dave.
Hey, Dave.
Hey, what's going on?
Not much. Let's do this.
Let's go. Episode 3 of season 2. Also, the third episode of our current series that we're focusing on, how to get acquired. This one, so kind of, last episode we talked about kind of the mechanics and like literal pieces of like, getting acquired, like the song and dance. And now it's kind of like, okay, cool. You're there. You've been acquired. You've got your bank account looks a lot better than it did the day before. And now you're kind of like, okay, how do we bring this all together? Like you have a lot of commitments. You also agreed to all kinds of stuff in that purchase agreement that we didn't even cover, but basically things that will bind you to the day you die and possibly beyond the grave. I'm not actually sure about some legal agreements, but so it's a big deal. And it's actually very complex and very, very important that you do this right. If this thing blows up, it's really bad news. So
yeah, don't let it blow up.
Don't let it blow up. For the love of God, make sure this works. So but I thought what might be fun, though, would be to actually talk about kind of like literally the day that this thing got signed. Because we had kind of this crazy run up. So the company that bought us, Rave Mobile Safety, they were looking to do their annual sort of like company kickoff jamboree. And so this happens, it's happening in early January of 2021. Two. 2022. 2022. Geez, I should probably know this, but that's fine. And basically they wanted to be able to announce that they had done the acquisition because that would get obviously their team all fired up. However, we had signed that lovely LOI in late November, I want to say.
Late November was when we signed the LOI, and then we were doing due diligence until mid-January. Yep.
And so basically it was this absolutely mad dash. And Chris, you alluded to this, that our lawyers literally said it was impossible. And we were like, well, we're going to try. Because we didn't want to do anything to jeopardize it. We want to make a good impression. We want to make sure that they're very happy immediately with the purchase of AppArmor. So let's jump forward to the day, like the day of their company big party.
It was a Monday, right?
I thought it was a Tuesday. It was Monday or Tuesday.
Yeah, something like that.
Early in the week. I think it was Tuesday, January 18th. And they wanted to make this announcement. So literally we were up all night working with the lawyers, going through the last things, and the signatures were going around. It's actually a complicated thing to get all the signatures because a lot of people have to sign a lot of documents for this thing to go. And so it finally gets to us. So by 9 a.m., we finally got all the sign-offs. Everything was signed. It had happened. Like it was legally binding. We were there. So this is at 9:30 a.m. So every morning at 9, by the way, we had a standing meeting. So during the standing meeting, Chris and I couldn't be more distracted because we were like, is this happening or what's going on?
Yeah. So none of our staff know this is happening.
Yeah, nobody knows, just Chris and I, of course.
We just got the signatures. We're doing our standard morning, we called it a scrum meeting, but we were doing a morning standing meeting with all of our staff. And we're highly distracted at this point. So continue, Dave.
9:30 a.m., we tell key staff. So we told basically 2 other staff members what was happening. To say they were surprised would be an understatement. So that was a little ominous because it was like, oh God, and by the way, I wanted to tell people, for what it's worth, I really, really wanted to share this information with people beforehand, but we could legally, we were not.
Yeah,
allowed.
we even asked our lawyers, and our lawyers were like, "Do not do that."
They're like, absolutely not. Like, if it could fall apart, right? So then by 10 a.m., we decided, okay, now we're going to tell the whole company. So we told the whole company. It'd be called "Wow." Shock and awe would be the category we're in there.
So let me ask the listeners a question here. Okay. If you were working in a company and it was just acquired and you just found out that, what would be the thing that you would think first? Dave?
I'm going to lose my job.
Right.
I'm getting fired. Or at least I just don't know. Uncertainty.
Right. So if there's uncertainty for even a split second, you're going to go to the worst possible scenario of what can happen. Right. Mm-hmm. So what did you do, Dave?
Well, the next thing I told everyone was, because, by the way, we had worked this into the purchase agreement and all that stuff, and we got guarantees on this, but nobody was getting let go. That was the first. I said, your job is secure. That's the first thing I said. Then I said, everybody's getting a raise. And I said, I don't know if everybody got a bonus, but people got bonuses. And then, by the way, all your benefits are getting even better because Rave happened to have better benefits than us in a few categories, namely unlimited vacation. So that was very appealing. And so it was kind of like this. I know not everybody's going to be looking at the video for our podcast, but you can check this out on Spotify or YouTube or whatever. But it was sort of like kind of like this moment.
Here's the thing, though, Dave, is despite all those assurances, I feel like many employees were still highly suspicious.
Yeah,
they're
and so we thought that naturally the next best move would be for them to meet their new boss. So Todd Pyatt, the CEO of Rave, joined at 10:30 a.m. So this is like half an hour after we told them. And then by 2 p.m. that day, our entire team was on the call with Rave Mobile Safety for their annual kickoff and they had 10 times more employees than us, and they were all on that call too. And then we all participated in that day of, hoorah for Rave Mobile Safety for one of our biggest competitor, kind of building, it's almost like a pep rally day, kind of get everybody going. And and so I remember the next day I was like, we had our normal Scrum meeting and people were like, was that real? Did that actually happen yesterday? It was
the craziest dream last night.
Yeah, exactly. So it was pretty wild. And it was this big thing. So, we were alluding to one of the biggest things right away, which is trying to, don't let fear, don't lose control of the narrative, right? Fear is poisonous and it can really take over something like this. But we were really keen to make sure that our employees got something good out of all this, because that obviously mattered a lot to us. But also that that they knew that they had the security. They everybody has a right to know the status of their job, and in that kind of a moment, it's you just have to be absolutely crystal clear. So that was a bit crazy. But then it's kind of like this. There's a couple of weeks there where you're they kind of left us alone because it's a lot of shock, and we're kind of bringing the team up to speed. We're doing all the HR operational stuff, which is bringing us onto Rave's payroll system and all those kinds of things. But it was kind of they were courteous enough to give us some space. But then there's kind of a very pervasive myth that I want you to understand as a founder, which is that you think that the only people you have to care about in all this is your own team. And at first, that's very true. Your own team is your absolute priority to start. But very quickly, you realize that you actually need to start building rapport and sort of bridge building for your people to be worked into the new company, to meet their new colleagues, and by the way, companies have different cultures, different people, different demographics, different backgrounds. There's a lot of complexity there, and bringing not just your operational pieces together, but also the culture together is essential. And Chris, I'll let you speak, I promise. But on this, I just want to say really quickly, there was an interesting piece by McKinsey, a big consulting company, if you haven't heard of them, which I don't know how, but that's fine, called Organizational Culture in Mergers. And it's it's called Addressing the Unseen Forces, which I think is kind of funny. But so it says, and I quote, as we have seen over the longer term, companies with aligned corporate cultures and strong organizational health deliver on average total shareholder returns 3 times those of companies whose culture and organizational health are not closely linked. Given the magnitude of this benefit, cultural alignment should be central to any merger integration. So this is interesting because McKinsey's very data heavy, obviously, But this kind of piece there, it's like, actually, culture is the most important thing. And
Yeah.
so you need to be able to translate your culture into the culture of that new company.
Yeah.
And this is hard.
I think one of the things that worked out well for us, though, and Rave was totally on board with this, is the approach was crawl, walk, run. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, at first, there was virtually no changes. We were owned by Rave, but we were running our company exactly the same way as we were before. Obviously, in the marketplace, we weren't trying to step on each other's toes and offer ice or any of that stuff anymore. We're very much trying to work strategically together to maximize opportunities for both companies, which worked out great. But yeah, definitely you don't want to shock the system initially. Let your staff kind of adjust to this idea. Do the easy stuff, get them on the new payroll system. I remember we were using Google Workspace and Rave was using Office 365. So we started like the process of getting them their, Rave email addresses and sorting out some of those like sort of less critical things. And that gave some time for the staff to kind of get accustomed to the idea that things were going to be a little bit different in the future. They knew, but at least it wasn't a big shock to the system at that point.
You know what I remember being really shocking, and which is so stupid in retrospect, but I was so shocked about the email address thing. Like getting a Rave email address, that like kind of rattled me because my email address was so important. Right.
Yeah. So much business for us. Yeah. It was definitely done by email. We really liked our brand and all that sort of stuff. And then it was kind of like losing our baby. Then all of a sudden our emails are from, at in a different email domain. So yeah, I totally know what you mean. But at the same time though, there were a lot of benefits. Like we were immediately like I know from the product development side, like we all of a sudden had resources. Like for instance, Rave had a chief information security officer. That was a resource that we never had. We were kind of doing that ourselves, or we'd have to get a consultant to come and help us with it, whereas they had that in-house. So like pretty quickly your staff are going to see that, oh wait, there are some real economies of scale, some benefits, some things that'll make my life easier now that we're part of this bigger group.
Yeah, and this is I think that's a really good point on those resources. But what's also kind of a really big challenge is you have sort of a way of doing things. Again, we've talked about this at length. So you have systems and you have a process, and your culture feeds into that. But I mean, like literally how you do stuff, that's going to be different. It's going to differ with the new company. It's very unlikely they're even using the same software in many cases to do their thing. So like getting on one tech stack is one thing, but then there's sort of like the natural friction that occurs when somebody else. So the other employees that from the company that's acquiring you, they do it a different way. And they fundamentally, the reason why they do that is they believe that is the best way to do it. Right. So there is this like immediate tension over like, well, why do you do it that way? And then kind of working into that is a challenge as well. And something that creates quite a bit of complexity and sometimes even like resentment. So you have to be really careful about even just, okay, like what departments. So we had 3 departments. It's sales, software development, which kind of included like product roadmap stuff as well. And then our operations team, which was like customer service and implementations. And so like finding the right seats in the sort of like Rave ecosystem was challenging. And in some cases, not always perfectly received. Like it was hard to do. It was hard to fit like a, what is a round peg into a square hole kind of thing.
Yeah.
Added complexity there for sure.
It's funny when we talked about the very first episode in this series where we were talking about like organizing your company and making sure you're really polished on all your operations and things that you're doing. It's one thing that I underestimated was how much I liked the way that we had been running our operation.
Yeah.
Not that it was necessarily better than the way that Rave was doing things, but just I liked it because, it evolved with us. And it was really hard to then sort of contemplate. Like I remember thinking about the way that we were deploying code to our production systems. I really liked it. I knew it. I was comfortable with it, all that sort of stuff. And Rave had a different approach to doing it. And, even just kind of contemplating that thought of potentially changing was like anxiety inducing.
Yeah.
Like there's going to be lots of things like that you're going to have to sort of work through. But you work through them. You have those conversations. You just try and be a good teamwork or team member and talk out your concerns and find the best path forward.
And there's two other things here too. I would say, there's also like, it's just like a scale thing. Like when we were 10, they were 10 times bigger than us, right? So it's kind of weird moving into that space. You're a small number of people anyway. And so, like as an example, so I did a lot of sales stuff naturally. So I went from having like a pretty small sales team, like 5 people, to I think we had 25, 30, maybe more. And that was surprising. And my boss was the CRO. So I had a boss. That was new.
Yeah.
That's
a shock.
There's a lot of shocks there, like very quickly, and learning how to scale. Like, so the number one thing that TCD and Rave were interested in right away was, okay, how do we sell into our base? How do we sell your product into our base? And how do we make sure we don't accidentally, affect your sales engine? And so that was my job, is basically sales enablement, like getting the Rave salespeople to sell our stuff, or even being able to talk about it enough so that our team could pop in and close the deal. And that was really hard. That took a long time. It's just because there's so many people. Like, it's just it's just you haven't. I gather that there'll be some people listening to us say, they may have a startup with hundreds of people and all that kind of stuff. I think with more people, the problem is the same, but with more people, it's actually just harder. Like, so you have 100 salespeople and you're moving into it. Well, that's a lot of salespeople. You have 45 salespeople and you're moving into a company with 150. That's a real whopper of a challenge. I mean, actually, we did see some of that with the MSI, Motorola. Sorry, MSI is Motorola Solutions, Inc. And their acquisition of Rave Mobile Safety later, there's kind of that scale issue existed again, where it's just like, whoa, that's a lot of people.
Yeah, you're kind of getting ahead of yourself, because we were actually acquired twice in 1 year, which is a little bit weird. But like when I think about some of those challenges, I think though that building that rapport. So I remember, working with having our support people and Rave support people and the managers involved and trying to bring that together. And that was challenging because, we had a certain way of doing things. We had like a meeting cadence. And it was out of sync with the way that Rave was doing their thing. And so like neither was right or wrong. It was just different. And it was, like you said, Dave, the round peg in the square hole kind of scenarios kind of happen a lot.
There were so many of these little instances of like things that like operationally needed to be sorted out. So I think for Chris and I, what we tried to do is we tried to have like clear guiding principles, and we communicated those principles to everyone, our staff, the folks on the other side, whatever. Those guiding principles were, we were focused on our people and making sure that our staff are taken care of, and they're still getting fulfillment out of their jobs and all those important things. We're focused on our customers and their success, and making sure that they're not negatively affected by this, which we didn't believe. We didn't think they were going to be negatively affected. I don't think they were. They all of a sudden had a single platform for a lot of the same stuff they were using. It was just actually many customers even emailed either myself or some of the folks, like Todd Pye, for instance, was getting emails from customers saying, this is unbelievable news, because now I don't have to worry about you guys competing against each other. We can all work together. We're all one happy family. And of course, there'll be lots of benefits there, which there were. And then there was, the last piece there is, again, that also like kind of like that tech component, like making sure that our technology and the way we did things, or kind of like the things that made us special from a software perspective, were preserved, because that is actually kind of what Rave was buying. And so those guiding principles, though, can help you when you're going through and trying to make like 10 different decisions on a given day about, okay, should we do it this way or that way, or why do we do it like this, or what makes the most sense here going forward with these two companies coming together. If you're principled and consistent and people are aware of those principles, it makes it a lot easier to build those bridges between both sides. So that was an important piece there as well.
Yeah, the tech stuff is pretty minimal. I think the biggest challenge you're always going to have in these sorts of situations, it's culture based. So it means it's usually HR based.
Yeah.
And that's where you're going to spend 90% of your time worrying about culture and HR concerns. The tech stuff, integrating payroll systems, like all that sort of stuff is actually really easy. It's just annoying. It's time consuming, but the tough stuff is going to be like getting your team and their team to act as one team, and all be going in the same direction.
And like, to be clear, your culture is still going to kind of exist. Like, I don't think it's not in the interest of the acquirers company to come in and crush your culture and say, you have to do it this way. That's not the right way to do it. You need to like respect the identity that those people have created around their roles and around the company. But at the same time, we all got to play ball. We're all one happy family now too. So there is kind of like, it's not like whose culture wins. It's about how can you bring these two together? How can you how can the sum be greater than its parts? You know,
Yeah.
And this was also a pretty nuanced thing. Well, the way I did it was kind of the way I have done, I guess, a lot up to now that I'm thinking about this. There's a real theme of like me building rapport with something up to this point. And in this case, it was so I was trying to build rapport with my immediate counterparts, and at any level, by the way. I'm not so hotty-toddy that I'm only going to talk to the executive team and we'll see how it goes. That's my VP, right? How it goes from there. I would talk to anybody who's willing to talk to me. I would have conversations with them, talk to them about AppArmor, about what we believed in, why we did it, why we think it works well with Rave, and all that kind of stuff. And this was actually super fun. On a couple of occasions, I remember. So two good ones. One is I remember running into on the sales team this guy who was like so excited to talk to me. I'm like, "Why? What's up?" And he's like, "I competed against you every day of the week." I was like, "What?" And we would go back and forth, and it was so weird to be able to share like, "Oh, like you won that one. Like, what happened there?" And it's like, "Well, I knew this guy, and we've been working together, and then you came in, you kind of like started to get in there. We're getting a little worried, so we brought the price down. We did this, and it was really fun. It was like we were sharing war stories, but you had the whole story. You know, you would tell
probably the happiest guy of the entire Rave team to find out that we had been acquired by them. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that was fun. And then there was another fellow who basically he was their main RFP guy. And so RFPs, request for proposals, basically these, for enterprise sales, you have these like big proposals. I think we talked about it in season 1, but basically you got to put like an unbelievable amount of time into these responses, and you can just like lose, which sucks because they don't really give you good feedback. Anyway, but we were going back and forth, and we had won this in 2017. We had won this, or 2018, we'd won this Colorado deal for all the mass notifications in the state of Colorado for the community college system, which is like a big, really big one. And he said to me, he's like, "I remember when you guys won that one. That's when I started to get seriously worried." And I was like, "That's funny." And then we would go back and forth, and he'd be like, we could name different deals that we won, and that he would say, "Oh yeah, we lost because of this, and you guys did that." And then I would name one, and he'd be like, "Oh, we lost." You know, it was just fun. It was a lot of fun. And the other thing too is it built a really strong rapport. Like they understood that we were just normal people doing work. We weren't the evil empire, you know, or like the upstart trying to, you know, affect their jobs. You know, we were doing our thing, and I think that was really, really essential. Those are like figuratively the bridges.
We had that on the development side as well, where our developers got to, you know, obviously meet and work with developers from the Rave side. And we'd have those types of stories as well. Like I remember having conversations like, "Do you remember when Apple changed that App Store policy and we had to go back and update all these apps and change all this stuff because, you know, it wasn't that silly?" You know, like all these like weird war stories were great ways to actually kind of bridge the cultures a little bit, because I think, you know, the frustrations we had with Apple and Google or whatever, you name it, they were having the exact same issues as well. And so it was just, you know, what's that saying? It's like prisoners that share the same rack develop a bond. And so we're all kind of like prisoners of Apple and Google.
But I like it. It's a good metaphor.
One of Chris's many metaphors. Yeah.
My favorite was when you used to respond to emails almost exclusively in metaphor. You just had to really like read between the lines. There you go, there's another one there, but you had to really kind of like, what is he saying? Anyway. But yeah, that's a good point though. Like, you know, again, across the board, it was all about like building these bridges. And this is and then once you've kind of like paved the way as a founder, you've started talking to those people, your staff are going to see that too and go, "Okay, maybe these guys and gals are okay. Maybe this is all right. Maybe this is something I can get into." And, you know, part of this too is you also tone the company line. You're there talking about how great it is that everything's coming together, because there are material benefits there. It's actually real, but you need to remind people pretty frequently. And, you know, all these things kind of tie back to leading by example. Like you get out there, you show the flag, you show that you're willing to do whatever it takes to bring all this together, and your people will follow you. They trust you. They believe in you.
Yeah.
You got to be there
Dave,
first.
One thing I want to put out there is in our share purchase agreement, you and I were required to work for a period of time, which was 3 months after the acquisition. But in reality, because we wanted this to be like the gold standard of great company integrations. So we actually stayed for 14 months to make sure that those three things, so like our customers, our staff, and our technology were all well integrated into Rave before we left, because we knew that we were going to be the ones that were going to be able to kind of like facilitate that sort of stuff, fall on swords, things like that, because we knew that our time was going to be up at some point. Whereas employees that were working there, well, you know, we wanted them to have great careers for a long time with Rave and then subsequently with Motorola. So it definitely made sense for us to stick around a lot longer, especially, you know, we haven't really touched on this much, but we were actually acquired. So we were acquired essentially like January of 2022. And then Rave was acquired by Motorola Solutions in December of 2022. So, you know, about 11 months later. So it kind of made sense that we went through like an integration and merging two companies. Then we were going to have to do it sort of like again. And so we stuck around for like 4 months of being part of Motorola to kind of help, you know, again, those same three things, but kind of like thinking more of the AppArmor people so they didn't get lost in the shuffle. And that worked out really well. And I hope that everybody appreciates that we stuck around for so long to make sure that went as well as possible.
I think like
as it could possibly go.
Whether or not they appreciate it, I think at the end of the day, you need to make sure you're doing right by the company that acquires you. You know, they're taking a pretty enormous risk as well. They're, you know, they want this to pan out too, but it's risky to do this, and it can fail. It can fail. There is a observable risk here. So it is on you, like both like morally, possibly legally, and and like if you're, and actually also financially, for you to make sure that this goes as well as possible. And Chris kind of said it there that we wanted to be the gold standard in sort of like mergers or like bringing it all together. You know, I think having a bit of an obsession towards making sure this goes well is only going to serve you extremely well longer term. And by the way, like even though we've left, like we can still talk. We still, you know, we talked to Todd Pye, we talked to the folks at Ray. We have a good relationship with them, and I think that was kind of our hopeful end game. And it sounds like a lofty goal, but it's just like, and this isn't like because you need to, but I think it's because we felt like we should be able to walk out of there with everybody happy, and we're waving, and we'll see you later, and we'll see you when you come up to Toronto. We'll have dinner with you. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. So I
get invited over to the office for happy hour every once in a while because it was a good exit.
I don't.
Everybody was pretty happy. Well, yeah, you've got family to worry about.
I do sometimes. Yeah, it's just harder for me, but that's fine.
You don't make it as often.
So just like wrapping this all up. So culture is insanely important in this acquisition piece. This can fail, particularly if the sort of like the integration of the cultures. You know, it's not one winning. It's the you know, again, a better outcome, you know, the greater than the sum of its parts. And then it is looking out for your people, understanding them, but also looking out for the people on the other side and showing your team that those folks on the other side, they are okay. They are good people. This is the new team. This is the new direction. We can do this, and leading by example. And then also, you know, there will still be HR issues in there. There's going to be bad actors. There's going to be tough stuff. Try to, you know, stick to your guns, be principled, give everyone a fair shake on both sides, lead with empathy on that, and you will be more successful. And then we didn't even really talk on this because we're going to nail this in the next episode, but start making yourself irrelevant. That's one thing that's going to come up is what you're trying to do is get out of the way. And we'll talk about what that looks like in our next episode of the series, the final episode of the series, part 4 of how to get acquired. And we'll touch on that next week. That is today's episode, though, episode 3. Thank you very much for joining us. Rate the pod and, you know, find us on social. And we will see you next week for the last episode in the series. Thanks, folks. Thanks for joining us. If you like what you heard, subscribe to and rate Startup Different in your favorite podcast app. If you want to see our radio faces, check us out on YouTube at Startup Different and look us up on social. We're probably there if you are. And lastly, do you want to feature your startup on the show? Reach out via our website, startupdifferent.com. See you next time.